Today I want to talk to you a little bit about disconnecting. What it means to disconnect, why we need to disconnect, how to determine if you need to disconnect, and some basic everyday things that you can do to disconnect. Now, the subject of disconnecting is huge, and we're going to go into that subject in depth in the upcoming Intuitive Development Program, Everyday Intuition with Samantha Hall, that's going to be going live online in August of 2014. But for right now, we're just going to kind of take just a really simple overview. First of all, we want to know why you need to disconnect. Well, it's because we get pulled energetically and even physically in many, many different directions in our lives. And at some point, we just get our energies pulled in so many different directions, it becomes hard to function. We lose track of our own priorities. We lose track of what's important to us spiritually and physically as well. And it just becomes a little bit overwhelming. Okay, so in a nutshell, when you're starting to get pulled in too many different directions, you're getting connected to so many other things, you're almost going to have an overload. It's almost like the power strip. If you've got a plug in every single power strip, and you don't need a plug in every single power strip, you're probably going to have an overload. Now, there's some things in there that need to stay plugged in permanently, but there's a few things that could come out on occasion. Unplug them while you're not using them, because you really don't need to, and only plug them back in when you need it. Or think about it, too, disconnecting as maybe a shutdown, either a complete shutdown of your computer and a reboot, or maybe just some kind of partial shutdown. Now, not everybody can go hibernate and like a bear and go live on a mountaintop and do that kind of disconnecting. And yes, that is possible, but for most of us and for today's video, we're talking about a partial disconnect, sort of everyday disconnect. Now, how do you know if you need to disconnect? Well, there's a lot of different deep, intuitive, spiritual ways to know if you need to disconnect, but for today, we're just going to keep it simple, and I'm going to tell you, ask yourself, have you been complaining? I need a vacation, I need a vacation, I need a vacation. Do you feel scattered? Do you feel brain fog? Do you feel like people are emotionally pulling you in a million different directions? Do you feel like people are physically pulling you in a million different directions? Do you feel like there's just no more room up here in the old brain hard drive to handle any more information or projects? If you've answered yes to any of those, or even not even sure, the answer is probably yes. You need to disconnect even just a little bit. Okay, so now once we've determined that disconnecting is important, and yes, in fact, I do need to disconnect just a little bit, now we're going to talk about how. And these are very, very simple hows. Now the hows can get very in-depth, very spiritual, very deep, very committed, and we'll go into that into the online program. But for today, we're just going to talk about simple everyday stuff. To disconnect, what do you need to do? Okay, well, think about all the areas in your life that you make an emotional or a conscious connection with people or things. Okay, let's start with the simplest of simple, the computer. Do you find yourself on social media a lot? Do you find yourself checking emails a lot? Do you find yourself connecting to people and things through the computer? If you do, and they're non-essential, think about disconnecting. Now, how long you need to disconnect or feel you need to disconnect is up to you, but think about disconnecting from that source. Think about the phone. If you have the ability to think about shutting down the phone for a certain period of time. If you can do it, go ahead and do that. Shut that phone down. Think about the television. The television is a huge connect because we watch emotionally draining shows. We watch dramas. We watch scary things. We watch all different kinds of stuff that pull our emotions, that pull our energies into another space. And that is draining us as well. And you call it entertainment, but a lot of times it's for certain people, maybe not so much for some, a little more for others. That's a big drain as well. So think about shutting off the television as well. There's three right there, three things that you can do to just make this partial disconnect. Now, are you going to flip the TV back on in the near future? Probably. Are you going to need to get into your computer in the near future? Probably. But to make that conscious decision on occasion to disconnect, to shut down for just a little while is what we're talking about. So you sort of free up a little emotional space. Now, how long you need to disconnect is entirely up to you. Your life may only allow you to disconnect for 10 minutes each day or an hour each day, or you may have the luxury of disconnecting from things for days at a time. But that's entirely up to you. The needs and the time frames are entirely up to you. But there's a few simple things to start with. Now, what do you do once you disconnect? What's the benefit of disconnecting? The benefit of disconnecting is to free up this pull of energy that's coming out of you, out of your body, out of your aura, out of your consciousness, and turn that energy back inward. Okay. Now, the depth at which you turn that energy back inward and do that sort of personal exploration is entirely up to you. And we are going to get, again, very in-depth in the program about what you can do with this disconnection time and how you can use it for self-exploration. But even if you only have a short period of time, you can allow that disconnect to allow you to sort of bring that pulled, stretched, scattered energy just back into center just a little bit, so you can think more clearly, you can focus more clearly, you can re-look at goals that you've set, re-look at priorities that have gotten out of skew. So the point is to just utilize your disconnect time, no matter how short or no matter how large it is, to turn that energy back inward, to round it back up, bring it back into the self, and utilize it to the best of your ability. So go ahead and just remember, first we need to know that disconnecting is important. The second thing that we need to know is how to determine if we need to disconnect. And then the third thing we need to know are the areas in life that we should be disconnecting from. Now, there's a ton more ways to disconnect, without shutting off your computer and without doing other things. And we're going to go in depth into that in the program. But these were just a few little everyday things that still keep you in the present world. It still keeps you doing your job and taking care of your family, but it just frees up a little bit of space up here in the energy for you to actually bring it back into the self and do what you need to do. So stay tuned for the online program that's coming up in August that'll go very, very in-depth into disconnecting and what it means to us. And if you have any questions, you can message me through Facebook, or you can go to my website at www.samantha-hall.com. Okay? And don't forget to disconnect.